What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview and everything goes completely off the rails? Today, we're breaking down the moment Robert Duvall walked onto the View set and sparked one of the most intense confrontations in daytime television history. Robert Duvall entered to a standard welcome, the audience clapping, the host smiling, and everything appearing normal. He was there to talk about his latest project, a film about small-town America that he both directed and starred in. Joy Behar began with what sounded like a compliment, saying she found the movie interesting. But then she added a remark that immediately shifted the energy in the room. She said, "Robert, your film seems to really romanticize rural America. Don't you think that's a little out of touch with reality? I mean, we know these areas have serious issues with education, healthcare, poverty. Why make a movie that ignores all of that?" Robert paused for a moment, clearly processing what she said. He responded calmly, explaining that his film wasn't ignoring anything. It was telling a story about real people he'd known throughout his life. He said, "These communities have dignity and values and deserve to be portrayed as more than just statistics or problems to be solved." Joy interrupted him. The first sign the conversation was turning tense. "But Robert," she said, "dignity doesn't pay the bills. These people voted against their own interests. They reject help from the government. They reject science. They reject progress. How can you make a film celebrating that?" Robert's expression changed. He leaned forward slightly and said, "Celebrating? I'm not celebrating anything, Joy. I'm showing human beings, people who wake up, go to work, love their families, and try to do right by their neighbors. Since when did that become controversial?" Joy fired back, saying, "It becomes controversial when those same people support policies that hurt others, when they vote for politicians who deny climate change, roll back rights, and spread conspiracy theories. You can't separate their so-called values from real-world consequences." The other hosts began to look uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to jump in and redirect, but Robert held up a hand. "Hang on," he said. "I want to address this." Turning to Joy, he continued, "You're doing exactly what's wrong with this country right now. You're sitting here in a New York studio telling millions of Americans that you know what's best for them, that they're too stupid to understand their own lives. Do you hear yourself?" Joy's face flushed. "I never said anyone was stupid," she replied. "I said they voted against their own interests, which is a fact. If you want an honest conversation, we need to call out these contradictions." Robert shook his head. "Honest conversation? You called my film out of touch before I even sat down. You've already decided what you think about these people without listening to a word I have to say. That's not a conversation. That's a lecture." The audience fell silent. The tension in the studio was thick. Joy leaned forward and said, "Okay, fine. Tell me then. Tell me why I should feel sympathetic toward people who want to take away reproductive rights, who don't believe in vaccines, who think the election was stolen. Go ahead, make your case." Robert took a deep breath. "See, that's your problem right there. You've lumped millions of people into one category. You assume they all think the same, believe the same things, want the same outcomes. These are individuals, Joy. They have different opinions on different issues. Some probably agree with you on some things and disagree on others. But you can't see that because you've already written them off." Joy crossed her arms. "I haven't written anyone off," she said. "I'm asking legitimate questions about the political reality we're living in. And frankly, Robert, your movie doesn't address any of it. It's all sunsets, hardworking farmers, and small-town charm. It's a fantasy." Robert's voice grew firmer. "It's not a fantasy. It's a perspective. It's a human story. Not everything has to be a political statement. Not every piece of art has to check boxes or push an agenda. Sometimes you can just show people living their lives and let the audience connect with them as human beings. Remember humanity, Joy? Remember when we could see each other as people first?" Joy leaned back, unimpressed. "That's a nice sentiment, Robert," she said. "But we don't have the luxury of ignoring politics anymore. Everything is political. The personal is political. Your movie, whether you admit it or not, makes a political statement by what it chooses to show and what it chooses to ignore." Robert replied, "So, you're saying I should have made a different movie, one that fits your worldview, one that condemns the very people I'm trying to honor. That's not art, Joy. That's propaganda." The word hit like a bomb. Joy's eyes widened. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Are you calling me a propagandist?" Robert didn't back down. "I'm saying you want art to serve a political purpose," he said. "You want every story to reinforce your beliefs. That's what propaganda is. Robert continued firmly. Propaganda tells people what to think. Real art challenges them. It makes them see things from a different perspective. But you don't want perspective, Joy. You want confirmation. Joy raised her voice, visibly offended. That is incredibly insulting. I've spent decades in this business asking tough questions and holding people accountable. Just because I'm not fawning over your movie doesn't mean I'm some kind of political hack. Robert matched her energy. And just because people don't live the way you think they should, doesn't mean they're wrong. You sit in your bubble and judge everyone who doesn't think like you, live like you, or vote like you. Then you wonder why the country is so divided. Whoopi tried to intervene. Okay, let's all take a breath. We can disagree without. But Joy cut her off. No, Whoopi. I want to finish this. She turned back to Robert. You're lecturing me about bubbles? You're a millionaire actor who spent his entire life in Hollywood. Don't talk to me about being out of touch. Robert let out a short, humorless laugh. I grew up in a military family. My father was a career naval officer. We moved all over this country. I've lived in small towns, big cities, everything in between. I've worked with people from every walk of life. So yes, Joy, I think I have a pretty good understanding of America beyond the Hollywood sign. Joy shot back. And yet you chose to make a movie that glosses over all the real problems those communities face. That's a choice, Robert. A deliberate choice to present a sanitized version of reality. Robert's jaw tightened. Sanitized? You want to know what's sanitized? Sitting in a television studio and reducing complex human beings to stereotypes. You think you're being hard-hitting and brave, but you're just repeating the same talking points everyone in your circle already agrees with. There's no risk in that, Joy. There's no courage in preaching to the choir. Joy's voice grew louder. I am not preaching to anyone. I'm asking you to explain how you can make a movie about rural America without addressing the racism, the homophobia, the resistance to basic science that exists in many of those communities. Those are facts, Robert. Facts don't care about your feelings. Robert leaned forward, his voice steady but intense. You want to talk about facts? Here's a fact. You just assumed that everyone in rural America is racist and homophobic. You made that generalization without a second thought. Do you realize how prejudiced that is? You're doing the very thing you claim to be against. Joy looked stunned for a moment, then recovered. I did not say everyone, she replied. I said many, and the voting patterns support that. These areas consistently vote for candidates who oppose equal rights, environmental protections, and common-sense gun laws. That's not prejudice, Robert. That's data. Robert shot back. Data doesn't tell you why people vote the way they do. Data doesn't tell you about the factory that closed down and took 1,000 jobs with it. Data doesn't tell you about the opioid crisis that's destroyed families. Data doesn't tell you about people who feel completely abandoned by a system that promises to help them, but never does. You see numbers, Joy. I see people. Joy snapped. Oh, please. Everyone has problems, Robert. Everyone has struggles. That doesn't give anyone the right to vote away other people's freedoms. It doesn't excuse bigotry. It doesn't excuse ignorance. Robert's voice rose to match hers. There it is. Ignorance. You think they're ignorant. You think you're smarter than them, more enlightened, more evolved. That's the real issue here, isn't it? You can't stand the idea that people might disagree with you for legitimate reasons. So you dismiss them as ignorant or brainwashed or corrupted. You can't even consider that they might see the world differently than you do. Joy suddenly stood up, catching everyone off guard. I consider plenty of possibilities, Robert, she said firmly. But I also know right from wrong. I know discrimination is wrong. I know denying science is wrong. I know spreading lies about elections is wrong. And if your movie doesn't acknowledge any of that, then yes, I'm going to call it out. Robert stood up, too, his tone unwavering. My movie is about a father and son trying to save their family farm. It's about love, sacrifice, and perseverance. It's about the human spirit, but according to you, that's not enough. According to you, I should have turned it into a political manifesto. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I still believe in telling stories that bring people together instead of tearing them apart. Joy pointed at him, her voice sharp. Bringing people together? How can we come together when? Joy's voice sharpened as she said, how can we come together when one side refuses to accept basic reality? How can we come together when one side wants to drag us backward while the rest of us are trying to move forward? Your movie doesn't bring people together, Robert. It lets one side feel good about themselves while ignoring their complicity in everything that's wrong with this country. The audience was completely frozen. Some looked shocked, others deeply uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin tried to intervene, suggesting they all sit down and take a moment, but Robert interrupted her. Complicity, he said. You want to talk about complicity? How about the complicity of media figures who divide this country every single day, who tell half the population that they're victims and the other half that they're villains, who profit off outrage and conflict? You talk about bringing the country together, but your entire career depends on keeping people angry and afraid. Joy's face flushed red. How dare you, she shot back. How dare you come on this show and attack me personally? I have fought for civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights my entire career. What have you done besides make movies and collect awards? Robert didn't flinch. I've tried to tell honest stories, he said. I've tried to show humanity in all its complexity. I've tried to remind people that we're all struggling, we're all flawed, and we're all worthy of compassion. That might not win me any activism awards, but at least I'm not making a living off hatred and division. Joy practically shouted. Hatred? You think I'm promoting hatred? I'm standing up for people who are being oppressed. I'm speaking truth to power. If that makes you uncomfortable, Robert, that's your problem, not mine. Robert fired back, raising his voice. You're not speaking truth to power. You are the power. You and everyone like you control the media. Control the narrative. Control what's acceptable to say and think. And anyone who dares to step outside that narrative gets attacked, canceled, labeled as a bigot. That's not fighting oppression, Joy. That's enforcing conformity. Whoopi finally raised her voice loud enough to cut through. Okay, that's enough. We need to take a break. But neither Robert nor Joy seemed to hear her. Joy pressed on. If you feel attacked for having backwards views, maybe you should examine those views instead of blaming the people calling them out. Robert shot back instantly. If you think everyone who disagrees with you is backwards, maybe you should examine your own arrogance instead of hiding behind self-righteousness. The camera was still rolling. The crew didn't know whether to cut away or keep filming. Sunny and Alyssa both tried to speak but couldn't get a word in. Sarah sat frozen, her mouth slightly open. Whoopi stood up, voice firm. We are going to commercial right now. But Joy ignored her. You know what your problem is? She said, pointing at Robert. You can't handle being challenged. You thought you'd come on here, we'd all applaud your little movie, and you'd go home feeling good about yourself. Well, reality doesn't work that way. Robert stepped closer to the table, his voice low, but cutting. My problem? My problem is that I came here thinking we could have an actual conversation. But you had your mind made up before I even walked through that door. You wanted a fight. So congratulations. You got one. Joy threw her hands up. I wanted a fight. You're the one who came in here defensive and hostile the second I asked a legitimate question about your film. You can't handle criticism, so you've turned this into some kind of culture war battle. Robert's tone dropped lower, the quiet intensity drawing everyone's attention. You didn't ask me a question, Joy, he said. You made an accusation. There's a difference. You accused me of romanticizing and ignoring reality. Those aren't questions. They're judgments. And when I tried to explain my perspective, you doubled down and attacked not just the film, but the people in it, and by extension, millions of Americans who live similar lives. Joy pointed at him again, her hand trembling slightly. I attacked a narrative, not people. Your movie pushes a narrative that rural America is this innocent, wholesome place being unfairly judged by coastal elites. But that narrative ignores the real harm caused by the policies those communities support. I'm not going to apologize for pointing that out. Robert shook his head slowly. You keep using the word narrative like it's a dirty word. Everything is a narrative to you. You can't just let a story be a story. You can't let people be people. Everything has to fit into your political framework or it's wrong. That's not analysis, Joy. That's ideology, and it's exhausting. Joy crossed her arms tightly, her expression steely. What's exhausting, she said, is watching people like you pretend we can just ignore politics and everything will be fine. Joy's voice trembled with frustration as she said, we can't ignore politics, Robert. Politics affects people's lives. Whether they can get health care, whether they can marry who they love, whether they can vote, whether they can breathe clean air. Your movie ignores all of that, and that's a political choice whether you admit it or not. Robert took a deep breath, his voice quieter, but no less intense. Let me ask you something, Joy. When was the last time you had a real conversation with someone who voted differently than you? Not an interview, not a debate, a real conversation where you listen to understand instead of listening to respond. When was the last time you considered that maybe, just maybe, someone could disagree with you and still be a good person? Joy's expression hardened. I talk to people with different views all the time, she replied. But I don't have to respect views rooted in discrimination or denial of reality. I don't have to pretend that all opinions are equally valid. Some things are just wrong, Robert. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you. Robert's jaw tightened. And there it is again. Wrong. They're wrong and you're right. Must be nice to live in such a black and white world. Must be nice to wake up every morning absolutely certain that you're on the right side of history, and everyone who disagrees with you is on the wrong side. That kind of certainty is dangerous, Joy. It's how people justify all kinds of terrible things. Joy bristled. Are you seriously comparing me to, you know what? I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. This is ridiculous. You came on this show, got called out for making a film that whitewashes reality, and now you're attacking me for doing my job. Robert shot back. Your job is to interview guests, not prosecute them. Your job is to have conversations, not inquisitions. But you've turned this show into a platform for one point of view. And anyone who doesn't share that view gets treated like an enemy. That's not journalism, Joy. That's activism disguised as journalism. Joy stepped closer to her chair, but didn't sit. You're damn right I'm an activist, she said fiercely. I've never hidden that. I believe in fighting for what's right. And if that bothers you, too bad. The world needs people who are willing to stand up and speak out, not people who hide behind both sides' arguments and false equivalencies. Robert met her glare. And the world also needs people who can see nuance, who can understand complexity, who can recognize that truth isn't a monopoly held by one political party or one ideology. Your version of activism is just tribalism with a moral veneer. You've decided who the good guys are and who the bad guys are, and nothing anyone says will change your mind. Joy's eyes flashed. When one side is trying to strip away voting rights and the other side is trying to protect them. Yes, I know who the good guys are. When one side is trying to ban books and the other is fighting for free expression. Yes, I know who the good guys are. This isn't complicated, Robert. It's only complicated if you're trying to avoid taking a stand. Robert's face was flushed now, his voice rising. Taking a stand. You think you're taking a stand. You're preaching to an audience that already agrees with you. You're surrounded by people who think exactly like you do. There's no risk, no courage, no sacrifice. Real courage is trying to bridge divides, trying to find common ground, trying to see the humanity in people you disagree with. But you're not interested in any of that. Joy slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the studio. I don't want to find common ground with bigotry, she shouted. I don't want to bridge divides with people who want to take away my rights or my friends' rights. And I certainly don't want to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks making a pretty movie about farms is somehow contributing to healing this country. Robert's voice went quiet again. Controlled, almost cold. You just called everyone in my film a bigot, he said. You just dismiss their entire existence because they don't vote the way you want them to. Do you hear yourself? Do you understand how deeply prejudiced that is? Stop twisting my words, Joy snapped. I didn't call them bigots. I said I won't compromise with bigotry, which exists everywhere, including in rural communities. Robert's voice rose once more. That's a fact, he said sharply. It also exists in cities. It exists in